how you can move your teaching and learning within your schools, colleges, academies and institutions from Moodle to Office 365. It would be good if you ask questions as we go through. My name's Helen Walker, and also on the line we have Phil McNair from Virtue, who will also be able to answer questions in the chat box there as we progress through the slide deck today. I won't be asking questions of you, but feel free to keep firing them through, and we'll cover them off as we go rather than them all being concertinaed at the end. So first of all today, let's look at the rationale as to why, if you're currently using Moodle, why you might consider moving your teaching and learning activities over to Office 365 already instead. What you have in Office 365 is a powerful suite of teaching and learning tools, which, in my view, having used both platforms extensively, 365 now does supersede Moodle's functionality. There's been a lot of releases, particularly over the summer period, which make it a really powerful tool for your teachers and your learners. In terms of another reason why Office 365 makes sense, is because you're not asking your teachers and your students to use a resource that they're not already familiar with. Most staff will be using the Office suite for work anyway, and you're using a suite of tools that are industry standard rather than Moodle, which is purely an educational tool. As you're probably aware already, another benefit of using Office 365 is that through the educational benefits license, your students and your staff can download 5 copies of the full suite for free, as well as being able to access online versions of the tools on their handheld devices, so they can get the apps for iPads or their Android devices. And so Office 365 content is available anytime from anywhere. So some of the things I want to touch on today are some of both the new introduction to the suite and some old favourites as well. Now, Office 365 groups is where we're going to start. And what these are collaboration groups that can be set up on an ad hoc basis within your tenancy. And these allow more effective collaboration and communication for your staff and your pupils. About 6 months ago, I just said that they were ideal for classroom use, but given the advent of some more additions to the suite, I would now recommend that 365 groups are ideal for your staff, for setting up perhaps year group working, so a year 6 group, an SLT group, an admin group, for extracurricular activities such as setting up cricket clubs, and for ad hoc student groupings. A number of schools that we work with use project-based learning, and they'll set up ad hoc student groupings using 365 groups rather than using a classroom and Sims groups for that. In terms of what groups look like, you will notice that when you go in to create a group in Office 365, there are now 2 types of groups that you can create. So just before summer, there was the standard group, and when you create a standard group, you get shared resources and functions. A few weeks ago, some of you, if you're already using groupings, will have noticed that PLCs were added to the suite. Now, these are professional learning community groups. A couple of key differences when you're setting up a PLC group. First of all, the default privacy settings is private. Now, that's been one of the grumbles from the education sector about 365 groups, is the default setting is public, so that if your staff are setting up a working group and forget to change those privacy settings, students can access the content. If they set up a PLC group, automatic privacy for themselves in that group. The other thing that a PLC group brings with it is a customized templated OneNote notebook, which is set up for staff professional development to encourage collaboration around projects, to encourage the sharing of teaching and learning resources and best practice. So in the same way as in OneNote, which we'll come to later. The type of notebook you set up determines the content of that notebook, the templated content. The PLC provisions you with templated content for your teaching staff. So any questions about the difference between standard groups and professional learning community groups before we just take a look at what you get provisioned within a group? Okay. So quick benefit of setting up any group, be it a standard one or a PLC group, is you get provisioned with these 4 core functions here. If you look along the top there where conversations is highlighted in green on this screen, you can see that you get provisioned with streamlined conversations when you're a member of a group. You get provisioned with sharing via SharePoint, and you can share group files and resources in dedicated SharePoint folders within your group without having to do any of the SharePoint setup that ordinarily you need to do. You get a group calendar, and you get a notebook and a planner. Now, OneNote, I'm sure many of you have used before. If not, we're coming to that later. Planner, new to the suite. I know that, for example, Trinity, I know Sutherland's here from Trinity. Planner is a project management tool. Still in its infancy, still needs some refining and some work, but a nice tool nonetheless to start doing some simple project planning and task allocation within working groups there. So groups, a number of our schools are now using those as the backbone of how they're organising staff workflow and communication and collaboration. Appleton Academy, for example, have moved their practice over from sharing via the network and working via folders and files on the network to organising their entire information stream via Office 365 groups. Okay. Next is Classroom. Now, this won't download automatically to your tenant. Classroom has to be drawn down, it has to be added to your tenant, but it's really straightforward to do, and it's now out of preview mode and fully operational for schools. This is, to use what is now a fairly old-fashioned term, this is a VLE. And this is really the nail in the coffin for any residual Moodle use that may still be happening within the institutions. Classroom replaces the need for forums, it provisions chat, it provisions assignment functions, which is what really has been missing from the 365 suite. You can give feedback to students, and students can feedback to you, and you can organise lessons via Classroom. So this is now Office 365's virtual learning environment for your teachers and your students. In terms of what you get within Classroom, it's a little bit like groups. You get a shared calendar, you get your Classroom group files, which are in OneDrive, and again, like pretty much everywhere else in Office 365, you get a terabyte of storage. There's a discussion forum built in there, but usefully you can mute students if you don't want them to participate in discussions until students and staff are happy with doing that. And then you get your OneNote class notebook. Classroom also has a built-in announcements function, so teachers can send ad hoc announcements to their students about perhaps homework that's due in, or hints and tips about how to tackle a piece of work. So if we have a look at Classroom now, in this slightly pixelated it looks on my screen image, what you can see here is this is a student view of Classroom, and you can see that she's got her classes there listed down the side, and you can see there that she has been assigned some biology homework. Marking can happen via Classroom too, and work can be returned to students with comments and grades. The only limitation currently in terms of comparisons with Moodle is that the grade book in Classroom is 1 to 100 only. On the Microsoft roadmap, there is the plan to introduce a different range of grades for your A's to use, and replacements for levels and the ability to enter customized grades as well. But currently it's 1 to 100, so maybe that your teachers need to do some mapping of what those grades mean when they feedback via Classroom. So if you haven't yet got that on your tenant, I would recommend that you have a look for it, download it, and start to have a play with Classroom functionality. The next tool that I wanted to cover off today is Microsoft Forms. Forms really replace quizzes, they replace surveys, and they replace the choice function in Moodle. If, as well as Moodle, your institution uses something like SurveyMonkey or Typeform or one of the other survey tools, Microsoft Forms replaces the need to buy in that extra functionality. You can distribute surveys, quizzes, and polls, both internally but also externally. So things such as your parent satisfaction surveys, staff wellbeing surveys, surveys for your wider community can all happen, as well as the sort of quizzes that you might want to send out to students on a class level. You can also, if teachers are feeling very brave, they can ask students to rate their lessons. So there is a rating function built into Forms too. Now, for me, one of the benefits of using Microsoft Forms above other proprietary survey tools and quiz tools is that the data that feeds back in comes immediately live back into Excel in the right format. So you don't have to do any crunching or manipulation of data that you often have to do when using SurveyMonkey, for example. It's all there in the right format for you to begin doing your data analysis. Such that a number of head teachers who we've worked with are already using Forms to conduct, for example, feedback when they're doing learning walks. So staff will be out assessing lessons with their iPads, feeding data directly back into Microsoft Forms, and that data is feeding back live into an Excel spreadsheet which the head teacher has a live view of. So that data is immediately available to the people who are collecting it and viewing it. In terms of what it looks like, very straightforward, as you'd expect, nice clean interface. You can set questions. This is an example of a multiple choice quiz. You can do all of the things you'd expect to be able to do with any of these sort of tools, which is provide feedback on right or wrong answers. So Sutherland, here's a question. Yes. Hello?
Helen, so you've seen a question from Sutherland now. He's
yep.
asking, do we think MS Forms will allow 2 or more people to contribute to the form?
In what way, Sutherland? In terms of constructing a form, in terms of allowing the development of the form, the writing of the form?
There we go. So
yes,
constructing and writing.
As far as I understand, yes, it's saved in OneDrive, and so I'm assuming that's a good question, Sutherland. I will test it immediately after this, but I am assuming that in the same way that you can allow edit rights, you should be able to allow edit rights to forms. Is that because a number of people contribute to the design and development of questionnaires, quizzes, and surveys that you use in your school currently, Sutherland? Yes, let me check that out for you, Sutherland, and we'll feedback on that when we send out the presentation later. Good question, quite a new addition to the suite, but I am presuming, like other Microsoft tools in the Office 365 tools, you can do that. Improving forms, in what way do you think they're basic, Jamie? Good question, because they look basic here. Well, they haven't got inbuilt logic at the moment. That is one of the things that is on the roadmap. But what else do you feel is missing currently from Forms compared to Google Forms? Jamie there? Ah, he is. Yeah, great. Okay, we've lost Jamie's question there. Calendar embedding an iPhone. Yeah, nothing like that currently. No, I appreciate that at the moment you haven't got that sort of functionality built in. So yeah, if you are used to using the those functions within Google, no, not there yet. But obviously, Microsoft's now on a road to try and defeat Google in this arena. So we shall see what emerges over the next few months. Okay, thanks, Jamie. For me, the jewel in the Office 365 crown when it comes to Office 365 as a teaching and learning resource is OneNote. Usually staff will open up OneNote, be completely befuddled and close it immediately, not quite knowing what to make of it. But it is a fantastic tool. Basically, what it provisions is shared digital multimedia notebook, where pretty much any sort of content can be embedded and readily shared and distributed between students and teachers in your institutions. So you can embed documents, emails, images, files, video, audio. They can all be added into notebooks, and you can also obviously, particularly effectively in the app, is you can add handwritten notes and mark work electronically. So whilst students are working in a notebook, you can, as a teacher, go into the pages on their notebook that they're working on and actually mark in front of them live, remotely. So they might be at home working on something. You might be at home doing your marking, and your marking is actually real-time marking of student work. The other thing which OneNote allows you to do, if your projection is a little bit in need of an update and you don't have mirroring technology built in, OneNote notebooks can become a way to ensure that your projector becomes a collaboration space. So you open up a page in a OneNote notebook, and staff and students can both be contributing to that page live, and it will be syncing, and in front of your class, student and staff comments will appear. So there's tons of different ways to use OneNote, and once schools start using it, they wonder how they ever got by without it. In some of the schools that we work with, we've got rid of the need for staff planners, for example. And staff instead do their planning in OneNote, which means that they can share lesson plans more readily. It means that planning can be monitored more easily. So OneNote is a great tool to think about using. So as I mentioned, student work can be reviewed anytime from any device. And OneNote can transform the projection space. But also, if you are using OneNote, one of the things which you might consider adding to your client is the Learning Tools add-in. Learning Tools is a suite of tools which support reading, writing, and students with dyslexia. So built in there, there's voice to text, text to voice, there's text manipulation, so you can change the size, the background color, the color of the font itself. And it also provides neat little tools such as phonic breakdown. So if you have a child who's struggling with reading, if you embed a PDF or a Word document into OneNote, Learning Tools will then read that document to them, and the child can change the speed at which that is read to them. So a lot of the SEND coordinators that we've showed this to believe that this is really invaluable for quite a lot of their students. In terms of the difference between the online and client apps, if you use Word Online or Excel Online or PowerPoint Online, I would generally say that you get about 80 to 90% of the full client functionality in those online versions of the apps. In OneNote, it's much diminished. You're looking at only about 50% of the functionality. So I would advise you, and we're looking at it here, to use the client. to always use the client or the app itself and we're using OneNote, because the online web version gives a poor end user experience. So if your staff are struggling and not able to access many of the functions of OneNote, make sure they're opening up their content in the client. Down the bottom of the screen here, you can see that this is the class notebook add-in, which again, staff are encouraged, as they're setting up staff and student notebooks, they're encouraged to add this to their client. And what this does is it makes the management of class notebooks much more straightforward. Now, a class notebook is a notebook that a teacher can set up, and it has three spaces really. It has a collaboration space where everyone, all of the students in their class and the teacher themselves can contribute. There's a resource area where teachers can put content that only they can edit but the students can view. And then what a class notebook provisions as well is an individual notebook for every child with predefined sections which the teacher can delineate. The teacher can look in any other child's notebook. The child cannot see any other child's notebook, obviously. And what this add-in at the bottom here allows the teacher to do is more readily manage what content appears where in those class notebooks. So it makes the management and the administration of marking and dissemination of resources and handouts via OneNote much, much more straightforward. The parallel to the class notebook is the staff notebook, where you as a core team can set up a shared staff notebook for your staff, perhaps to distribute policies or to function as an electronic version of your staff handbook. And again, you can provision all of your staff members with their own individual notebook. And you might want, for example, in the staff notebooks, to add sections such as CPD or performance management notes or lesson planning and resources. So both of those apps are available from the app launcher. You might have to go hunting for the staff notebook app and click to view all my apps just to access staff notebook there. Next tool, which some of you might have your head in your hands already and be saying, I'm never going to use that, but some schools find Yammer really useful, and particularly a number of multi-academy trusts are using Yammer as a way to quickly start cross-trust collaboration and communication. What Yammer is it's social networking for businesses, really. That's where it first emerged as a sort of business-safe alternative to Facebook. And it does everything you'd expect a social networking forum to allow you to do. You can collaborate, you can start conversations, you can share updates about what's going on, and you can do project organisation via Yammer. It's got some nice tools, which a number of organisations really like. You can praise colleagues, or should you, at some point in the very, very distant future, think that it was wise to introduce students to Yammer. I haven't seen a school do it yet, but you can praise students. But it's also got badges built in as well, so you can assign badges to people and say, well done for helping out with some of the extracurricular clubs, for example. In terms of what it looks like, it looks a little bit like Facebook, really. So you've got your wall down the centre here. You can share files, but the limitations there is that you can't get neat folder structures operating in Yammer. So you just end up with a list of files and folders. But you can set up Yammer groups, and the big advantage here is that those groups can be composed of people external to your organisation. So some organisations have used Yammer as a way, for example, to organise governors, set up an external group for governors and to work and communicate around that sort of external activity using Yammer. Do any of you use Yammer currently? I'm expecting I'll just get 17 no's coming up in the chat box here. But worth considering if it was already forced down to, oh dear, you don't want to be forced down. You can switch Yammer off. And there are various things that we usually recommend by default that you switch off What an experience that must have been, Andrew. You can switch various functions off when you're setting up Office 365. We usually advise that Yammer's switched off. We advise that the facility for students to create groups is switched off, and that we switch off the facility for students to change their profile pictures as well. So those are the three things that we automatically say. Switch them off in the first instance and then think about what you want to do going forward. It is on by default now, Sutherland, but certainly we switched it off for the academies that we've worked through over the summer, because it would be a huge piece of change management, I think, is the easiest way to talk about that. But certainly some schools, as I say, some trusts have adopted Yammer and are getting a lot out of it. I'm pleased it is, Sutherland, at the moment. I think you've got plenty to be going on with in terms of the change management that you're undertaking around 365. As I mentioned earlier, Planner is a fairly new horse to the Office 365 stable. And it has got some limitations, but it's a fairly basic at the moment project management tool. One of the issues which actually Sutherland highlighted to me about Planner was at the moment, if you create a project task, you can only assign that to one person currently. And again, on Microsoft's roadmap, there is the plan to ensure that one task can be assigned to many, but at the moment it's one-to-one task assignation. But it's nice as a way of starting some basic project management. You get provisions with Plan once you set up a group. So if you've got a group established, they will automatically get a planner with it. And here you can see, this is a sort of visual view we can get around project progress and task progress once you set up Planner. I think it's got a long way to go, but it might be a nice thing to introduce to, for example, business study students. A lot easier than using projects in the first instance, to just get them used to doing some perhaps group planning around projects and tasks in classrooms, rather than thinking about it as a whole school task management function. And last thing I wanted to show you today is Office Mix. Office Mix is actually an add-in to PowerPoint, and it appears as another tab on the ribbon once you install it. And really it provisions that sort of, well, it provisions two things. It provisions a sort of Camtasia functionality, whereby you can record your screen, annotate content, provide web-based lessons. It's ideal for flipped learning. Good to encourage students to do it. Perhaps ask them to, for example, annotate a diagram of a volcano and explain what all of the elements are doing, and create a little learning nugget around that. But it also provisions you with the function to create quizzes, multiple choice quizzes, free response quizzes, true and false quizzes, etc. And what's really powerful about this is these quizzes and the results of these quizzes are saved in the teacher's own learning analytics dashboard, so that you have a log of how long it's taken each student to progress through each question, how long they've spent on each slide, who's got what right and what wrong. So if you're looking at starting to do a little bit of detailed learning analysis within a classroom context, Office Mix is a good place to start. Microsoft have partnered with a number of third-party suppliers, and there are Khan Academy videos already embedded in there. There's a nice Python suite of content which can just be readily embedded straight into PowerPoint. There's a raft of quizzes around it, and so before you know it, you've got a 6-week scheme of work that you can distribute to your students immediately without doing too much to it to adapt it for your students. So that is a quick gallop through some of the key teaching and learning tools in Office 365. Hopefully, some of you will have seen some tools that you weren't aware of. and we'll have more in your armoury in terms of being able to convince those staff who are holding on by hook or by crook to Moodle that there are alternatives in the suite here. Any questions? No? Phil, anything to add before we move on to the next slide?
No, I think it's just, I'm being asked an awful lot to find alternatives to Moodle. I think, hosting costs are going up, aren't they? Support costs are going up for Moodle as well, and I think it's good to look at the alternatives out there. I think most people on this call have actually got Office 365, are certainly aware of it. So it then comes to what can Virtue do? How can we help? There's obviously an awful lot here, and I think aside from the technology, a lot of this is about change management, and it's that education, it's the training piece. So what we did, of course, is start to have a look at that and think, okay, what does that look like? So, is it a day? Is it 2 days? Is it 3 days? Is it a week? We could just run on and on and on forever with training, but obviously most budgets won't allow us to do that. So what we wanted to do, of course, is just put some real simple packages together for people, which I think, can you advance the slide there, or can I?
Yeah, I'm just responding to Sutherland.
There we go.
Here. There we go. Oh, right.
There we go. So what we did. Helen and I, we had a look at this, didn't we? And thought, how do we help people? What can we do? And I think we came up with, the first step here is really understanding the current use of Moodle so it's working with your staff and your students for half a day, and then providing a half-day overview of this Office 365 suite. So much more, an overview of what we've looked at today, but then focusing on that core classroom functionality. So that's the option one there. So 2 half days, so that's your initial audit, and then the 365 overview. And then building onto a second option there is an additional day, and what we do is we then work with key staff, and that's to begin to develop the teaching and the learning resources within Office 365. And it's really focusing on those resources, but also the development of the staff skill sets as well. We can deploy all this technology, but unless it's actually looked at in the classroom and we're developing the teachers, it'll just be, another one of those virtual learning environments that are never ever used. And then finally, another option that we put together and bundled together was adding in team teaching. And that's really to address that. What we find, I think, Helen, you might agree, is often the common block of staff confidence in adopting new technologies in the classroom. So what we look at there is, it's aiming to teach intent a number of staff in the...
It's going into the classroom and working with teachers. That's often really useful when teachers are taking their first steps at using Office 365 with the students. And there might be complexities around students accessing OneNote, for example, or they might not be sure that they will be able to manage that rollout. So we usually choose one of the products that staff would like to start using with their classes, and we go in as the extra pair of hands, as the person who can help the students get set up, access what they need to access. And the other great benefit of being in a classroom, either for half a day or a day, is that if there are any glitches or any issues, either staff side or student side, it allows us to troubleshoot live and on the ground, so that those little niggles don't prohibit uptake. Because obviously, as an ex-teacher myself, I've experienced, and my colleagues had experienced, trying to use something for the first time, it's falling over the first time you try to use it, and therefore you're never going back to it again, using confidence and trust. So often it's worth getting someone else in there for the day with you who can ensure that it is a success, And if there are any issues, they can be nipped in the bud immediately rather than being something which prohibits uptake, which is not what anyone wants to happen. So that's why we've seen it be of real benefit. And then from that, obviously, you start to build up groups of staff experts who can then cascade their information, their knowledge to other members of the staff, and you start to build up, competency across the staff body, and those skills get cascaded across your institution. So it's a little bit of investment up front, and then really, as you all know, Office 365 is once you start to use it, a straightforward beast, but sometimes there are glitches when you first start to use it in a classroom context. So.
Yep, perfect. So I hope everybody's got something out of that. I think it's fair to say 365 is moving on at an alarming.
Every time I log in at the moment, Phil, there's something new every week. PLC
which is protected groups have been announced this week as well. I see finally, so that's a
there we are.
Thing.
Good.
So we can stop people deleting information out of them, so that's good. So really just to wrap up, I think if there's any further questions, if anybody's got about any of the content at all, then for those of you that don't have my contact details, you can obviously reach me in the office, or my email address is there. If you just drop me an email and we can have a chat further, or get any more questions right, Helen. What we'll also do is we'll send a copy of the slides to everybody that's been on today, so you've got those for reference.
That's a question there from Luke. You can't yet, Luke, no. And that's why a lot of the maths in the first instance need to think really, really carefully about how they're setting themselves up. If new schools are adding, for existing schools coming together, it's one of the complexities is looking at how you can manage communication and collaboration across different tenants. But groups at the moment, no, but there's such a push for it, certainly, particularly from the maths. We'll see what happens in that space. No problem, Luke. That's it for today then, folks. All right, cheers then. Sorry about the audio at the start. Lovely finally to be able to talk to you all.